it took resilience being in that environment, and also recognizing that sometimes those hard initiatives or initiatives that require a lot of change are the best opportunities.
Welcome to Aon at the Top, where I have the honor of interviewing some of the most distinguished executives, C-suite, and board members about their journeys and paths to success. I'm your host, Nicole Ward, the Senior Vice President of Sales at Aon. At Aon, we help you make better business decisions by turning risk into resilience. So today we have the opportunity to speak to serial public company board member Caroline Tsay. Caroline Tsay is a tech leader, builder, and boardroom force who has scaled businesses, launched startups, and guided major companies strategically and operationally. She's done everything from leading teams at Yahoo and Hewlett Packard Enterprise to co-founding and running her own company to serving on some of America's most highly visible boards. Caroline's most recent entrepreneurial endeavor was Compute Software, a cloud optimization company she co-founded and led as CEO, helping enterprises run optimally on the public cloud. Before that, she was vice president and general manager of software at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. She also held several product leadership roles at Yahoo across search, advertising, and e-commerce. Her board experience is equally as strong. She currently serves on the board of directors for the Coca-Cola Company, Morningstar, Semrush, and NICE. She's also been a board director at Rosetta Stone and Travelzoo. Named among Silicon Valley Business Journal's 40 Under 40 and the National Diversity Council's top 50 most powerful women in technology, Caroline combines sharp technical and product chops with strategic leadership and empathy. She holds a BS in computer science and an MS in management science and engineering, both from Stanford. She's also a mom of two and speaks Mandarin Chinese conversationally. I mean, Caroline, what an extraordinary background. I'm so excited to have you here today and to jump into the conversation.
Nicole, thank you so much. That was a fantastic introduction. I'm excited to be on your podcast and to chat with you today.
Wonderful. Well, let's go back a little bit, if we could, to origin story. You've had such a unique path from product management at Yahoo to executive roles at Hewlett Packard to co-founding and leading a startup. And now you serve on the boards of some of the most amazing iconic companies, Coca-Cola, Morningstar, ones that we shared. I wonder if, looking back, you could say what experiences early on shaped you most as you've come to find yourself as a leader.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for asking. I'd say my background and career has been very broad and deep as well. I've got the kind of consumer experience versus B2B experience, large company situation, small company situation, or even early stage startup with my own company, and established companies as well as entrepreneurial situations. At Yahoo, that really taught me resilience. Remember, this is a time back in 2007 to 13 when I was there, the company was going through so much change, 6 CEOs, and trying to prioritize whether it was a media company versus a products and technology company. And so it took resilience being in that environment, and also recognizing that sometimes those hard initiatives or initiatives that require a lot of change are the best opportunities, because you jump on those and those may not necessarily be the ones that everybody picks up on, but opens doors for you. So I think that was just a huge learning and something that shaped me a lot as a leader. And then I'll say just another experience is at HPE. I was brought into a company, an organization that was doing things the same way for some time, very much focused on on-premise licensed software, but seeing a lot of ankle biters eat away at the market share. And so everything from thinking about product-led growth, UX and UI or user experience, as well as the customer experience and go-to-market were just such important aspects of that transformational change at the company. And that taught me so much as well.
Those are great examples. And if we went a few layers deep underneath those, where did the grit come from in your early years? Maybe, your first, 20 to 25 years on the planet. Where did you learn the ability or the traits to be resilient, to lean into the things that were really hard?
Gosh, I'd say being one of the firstborn or the oldest of siblings probably just instills that in you right away. But I think a big part are so many of folks that have influenced me in my career and life, that, I can speak to certainly. But I think for me, it's always, how do you stay focused on being ultra productive and being resourceful and making an impact. I think that has stuck with me to keep that resilience going.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. Just in terms of impact, right? Keeping your eye on that, as as the goalpost, if you will. It's such a brave move when someone goes from what I would say is a very corporate career, right? Very much a
Right.
corporate citizen, which I can relate to, but then has the bravery to step out of that, to start their own company, to become an entrepreneur. That's a jump. And it, not only just the doing of it, but, the mental that you have to go through to do that. What motivated you to do that? What inspired that?
That's a great question. And it wasn't a decision I took lightly because, as you said, right, it was this corporate career path I was on, and starting a company is a totally different thing. I would say what really prompted me was, well, I've been an entrepreneur inside of large organizations, so somewhat of an entrepreneur at Yahoo, working on new initiatives there, same with HPE. And I was very curious as to how do you do something from scratch without the support of and the resources of a broader company. And so, very curious about how to do that essentially on my own and being a true owner. And I learned so much from that experience. I think that's actually one of the most I've learned, right? You start out with no brand, no identity. You've got to build that up from scratch, right? You don't have the backing of an HPE or a big company to go out and do sales. Customers want to be able to trust you, but what do you have? And so just learn, raising funds, dealing with venture capitalists, just a whole world of new experiences on that one. But I would say learn a lot, very challenging, but the timing had to be right with co-founders who had complementary skill sets. So I think all of the stars aligned as I was thinking about making this move. So in addition to being curious, wanting to be a true owner, I really had to have a set of co-founders or a great team to do that with me.
Interesting. And if we take it one step further, you going from having been a CEO, operating in the trenches, building out a company as an entrepreneur, and all those challenges you just mentioned, to now where you sit as a board director, where you're really looking at a guiding strategy and oversight for some marquee names. That's another whole different layer. How have you navigated through that?
It took me being on my first public company board, quite frankly, which was Rosetta Stone, to really understand that as a board member, you're not doing the job, right? You're not doing the CEO or the management team's job. You might be a sounding board and have influence and, of course, share any experiences or insights you have, but ultimately you're just not doing the operational day to day. And so, one example of where it just really stood out was we had been talking about a specific leader in the organization and whether that person was the right person for the job. And after some time, the board evaluated that it probably wasn't the right person for the job. I personally had a conversation with the CEO, and I got a very, very pissed off response. And he said to me, Caroline, if we get rid of this person, what am I going to do? What do you want me to do? This person is better than having no one. And so that made me go, oh, whoa, I need to step back, right? Again, I'm not in those shoes of the day to day. And as a board member, you're operating at a such high level. I can certainly provide input, but it's not to direct the CEO and the management team to do something specific, right, necessarily. And so I think that was one experience that really defined kind of moving from an operational role into a oversight in the boardroom. And then, as CEO, you may have blind spots because you're focused on running the company. And I think what's great about being on the board of different industries and types of companies is that I can bring to the board or the company, right, what the landscape may look like, or, thoughts on the competitive space, and can bring that outside view.
Yeah, that's a great perspective and really good insight, because I think anyone with their first board role, there's what we imagine it to be. There's board readiness classes that you can take. There's some preparation, of course, but you really don't know until you get there. And then you're like, oh, wow, it's a completely different perspective and view. So well articulated. That's a great example. If you think about some of the most influential, maybe mentors or role models that you've had in your journey, are there lessons that they gave you that you can call out a little bit, or are any of those lessons perhaps still guiding you in any way?
Yeah. The first one I'm going to start with is my mom. She is the strongest person I know emotionally. And so she's instilled that in me as much as that's impossible. And she's also fearless. I just remember back at Yahoo being stressed out about a promotion, having a conversation with her, and her going, "Caroline, what's the problem? Just go ask for it." And I'm like, wait, what? Okay,
I love that.
that sounds simple. And so anyway, I have to give a shout out to my mom for sure on that one. And then certainly have had a number of bosses who have become my mentors, if you will. And one who stands out was someone who was my boss back at HPE when we were going through a lot of change. And it was difficult to do that in that environment where a lot of folks had been doing the same things. I had to bring in a whole new organization, change processes, kind of the structure, even the culture of the organization. And I learned that you really have to over communicate, right? Not everyone's going to jump on the mission and the bandwagon from day one. You have to overly communicate and do that 10 times over, and also ensure that you bring people along. Right. So maybe people just can't be on board, or certain folks can't be on board with your goal and objectives, which is okay, but ensure that you're still trying to bring them along. So that's stuck with me from my HP days.
Good lessons for sure. And now pivoting a little bit to sort of the boardroom perspective and governance perspective that you have, how has all of your CEO experience really informed the way that you contribute to strategy and risk oversight now as a board director?
Yeah, so I'll start by referencing the saying, strategy without execution is just hallucination. So my CEO experience has certainly given me a very practical lens on strategy and risk oversight. When you're in the CEO seat, you're not just setting strategy, right? You're living with the trade-offs, resource constraints, and execution risks every single day. And so I'd say that has been a very important perspective to help me as a director figure out whether a strategy is, ambitious enough and also very importantly executable. It also gives me an appreciation for the types of risks that can really derail execution. Like I'm thinking talent gaps, pricing and go-to-market, distribution challenges, or emerging technologies like all the discussions around AI. So I've had to make calls like that, make decisions for the companies I've been involved with, but I have empathy for management on those types of decisions, and still have a line on accountability, a sight on accountability. I'd also say that being a CEO has reinforced for me that oversight isn't about second guessing. Right? You're still going to have to ask the right questions. You have to surface blind spots, and then ensure management has resilience and contingency planning for any kind of situation to navigate uncertainty. And I think even more so during these times.
I love what you said there about identifying blind spots and being willing to ask the really difficult questions. I think it's such a core piece, right? Such a pillar. You also said something around AI And I wonder, in companies where technology isn't the core product, which I know you've had a lot of your background in ones that have, but when you think about like Coca-Cola, how do you help ensure that the board is asking the right questions about AI, around digital transformation, and just emerging risks?
That's a great question. It's something I've really had to think about because I think coming from Silicon Valley, being so much in the tech world, you end up being in almost this bubble. And once you step out, you're like, wait a second, whoa, companies and other industries just don't run like this. Or the structure and the functions and the roles aren't like this. And so I think you really have to keep in mind that it's not about the tech, right? It's about like, what are we trying to accomplish as a business? And what can we do to be able to support that? So we're not asking like, what's the latest model or like, what are our fine tuning techniques? We're asking how can data strengthen our consumer relationships and understanding of our consumers? And then how can AI improve our supply chain or marketing effectiveness, right? So I think my role is to ensure the board's questions are practical and forward-looking, but really tied back to the business, and it answers the so what. I really don't expect every director to turn into a tech person, but as a board, we do have to be confident we're asking the right so what questions. And so I think that is what I try to focus on in working with companies that are not your traditional tech companies.
Yeah, it puts you in such a great place, having had that sort of a cross context experience that you've had. And I wonder what governance practices on that note translate across, tech and global brands or consumer retail, and then which do you have to tailor?
Yeah, there are definitely governance practices that translate across all contexts and companies. For example, discipline risk oversight, strong financial management or stewardship, and a very clear framework for CEO succession and talent planning. And that's the case whether you're in a high growth tech company or a global consumer brand. So good governance means fostering an open, transparent relationship between the board and management, and questions can be asked, and accountability is clear. Where I think it needs to be tailored is more in pace and focus. In high growth tech companies, boards probably are leaning in more on, hey, what's the talent strategy? Go to market execution. Are we focused on product led growth? Are we, do we have more of a sales focus? And then capital allocation or any kind of investments in M&A to fuel that growth. Whereas I would say in established brands or companies, the emphasis might be more on, the brand piece, like how do we protect and uphold the brand and its values. Resilience, I mentioned this earlier, and managing risks that might come from scale, right? So maybe that's dealing with a regulatory environment, reputational impact, or global supply chain. So I think in both cases, the most effective boards try to calibrate their style based on that company's stage or industry and strategy.
Super helpful. And what's your thinking about how you balance risk with growth and innovation for the companies that you work with, right? Balancing that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a tough one. Risk, I think, and growth are just two sides of the same coin. But I usually start with again, what is the long-term strategy or objective? And what does the company need to do to get there? I think any meaningful innovation or growth comes with some risk. But then if you don't, do it, or if you avoid it altogether, you're really risking disruption or becoming obsolete. And so as a director, I would say the most, what we can do really is to ensure that there's clarity, like what are the different scenarios, what are the downsides, what are the contingency plans, so that way the company's looking at ideally the right risks at the right times, and then with the right guardrails to be able to protect the value that the company's trying to achieve.
And From a data privacy, cybersecurity, and AI, regulation perspective, those are all really top of mind for a lot of the board members that I talk with globally, right? And what frameworks or red flags do you personally sort of look out for when you're assessing a company's preparedness?
Yeah, so I'd say I'd look at three areas when assessing preparedness. One is definitely the governance piece. So not just at the board level and visibility into data privacy, security, and AI use, but also at the executive level, right? Do they have the right steering committees or centers of excellence in place, regular reporting and alignment with the rest of the functions across the organization? Because if those things are missing, that is a red flag as to whether the issues are treated kind of purely technical rather than strategic. And then second is if an incident happened tomorrow, right, how quickly could we restore operations? Like, is there evidence of testing, simulation, continuous improvement, tabletop exercises with the board, across management, or incident response plans? And so that's, I would say, another big area that I personally look for when assessing preparedness. And then the third is regulatory and any implications from that, like when it comes to AI, ethical readiness. So is the company proactively mapping out new rules and understanding what new legislation or regulation is coming in place versus being very reactive, right? And I think the companies that really stand out on those treat privacy, cyber AI as really enablers of trust and growth, not just like let's check the box and exercise around that.
Got it. Very good. Super helpful. And just to get your thinking on that, and I wonder, pivoting a little bit into like sort of talent and succession and leadership, with your engineering and product leadership background, how do you think boards should approach oversight of talent risk, especially when it comes to senior technology and innovation leaders?
And that's becoming an even more important question that, I just keep hearing across all the boards. But I'd say the first thing is whether the company has the right leaders in place to deliver on its technology and innovation agenda. So that right skill set, right? Do we have gaps? Are these leaders clear on their vision of what they want to accomplish? Because that's, I think, really has to be in place to go and achieve any kind of speed and execution when it comes to new, emerging tech and AI. The other piece is bench strength and retention too. So frequently across whether the board, if the full board or within the talent and comp committees, we're paying very close attention to succession planning, to pipelines, and whether there is the right retention, performance kind of management, occurring in the company. So that knowledge and the capability has to be widespread, right? Mm. And then the third, I'd say, is culture and the operating model. So as I mentioned earlier, a tech company might have like product leaders, right? They have got engineers. In a non-tech company, they don't have such thing as product managers. And then even then, they might think of IT folks who are configuring systems as engineers, or they might call that, that function engineers when it's not necessarily the case. They don't necessarily have folks who are building things. And so I think ensuring that you've got kind of the right way of thinking about who's going to lead these, if you don't have those types of functions and roles, and setting up the right organizational construct is really important for ensuring that there's the right talent and tech and innovation to go lead that for the company.
Yeah, super important. And I wonder, how do you think boards should engage when it comes to CEOs and succession planning? And I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but where do you see the right balance is between the oversight versus, oversight of the board versus management's role?
I think a lot of companies can get this wrong or have gotten it wrong. And I've been on that side. And I've been in the situation where we've been ahead, right? Thinking years out in terms of CEO succession, who is going to be next in line, or at least a process around that. And I think CEO succession planning is 100% the board's responsibility. And that needs to get addressed several years, if not many years in advance. Usually it might sit in the nominating and governance committee, where they are delegated the responsibility from the full board to kind of look into who are the, rising talent. Do we have talent inside the organization? Do we need to plan for, looking outside, right? So all of those as part of the process is really important. And the CEO or management team isn't making this decision because, again, it's got to be the responsibility of the board, but they can certainly, provide input and feedback in that situation. So I think that's the best way, just planning years in advance, delegating a committee on the board, and then ensuring that, you are looking at right what that pipeline looks like, or whether you have to look at external candidates.
Thank you. I wonder, is there advice, because many of the folks that are listening to this are aspiring to the C-suite or aspiring to the boardroom. What advice would you give to the sort of next generation of leaders who are trying to either serve on boards or get to the C-suite of major companies?
Yeah, I do get asked that question a lot. And I'd say number one is, being on a board is not hands-on. I mentioned this earlier, and you're not doing the day-to-day job of the management team or the CEO. And so you really have to think about whether that is something you want to do. Because it's so different. And there's really a fine line between the two, an operational role and being on a board. But you do have to think you're not going to be building something directly, right? You're not going to be the one managing on a day-to-day basis. So that's one. I'd say another is to focus on your career successes and milestones and build an identity outside of your companies. I got this advice when I was working with an executive coach at HPE. He said, Caroline, your day job is not just being focused on your work, right? You've got to think about your impact, your subject matter expertise, and what you can bring outside of your company to other folks. And so I think that is really important to do if you're interested in being on a board. Those are, I would say, the two pieces of advice I give to anyone considering board service.
I think those are great thoughts. And when you think about the impact that you personally, Caroline Tsay, wants to have, whether it's in business or beyond, what do you hope, your leave behind will be? What impact are you looking to make?
So, Nicole, you might not believe this, but I think this is the hardest question I think I've ever gotten. And it, as I was preparing for this podcast, it was really hard for me to kind of think through that, right? Because I can go, is it, the boards I've joined, the companies I've worked with, certain levels I've achieved. But at the end of the day, where I feel most fulfilled is when someone reaches out and says, Caroline, you've made an impact on my life in this way, or you taught me this, or I've learned this from you. And that, I don't know, it sounds so, it's just straightforward, but that is the legacy that I want to leave behind. I wish I could do it at greater scale. But I think where I can impact others is really what drives me and makes me stay focused on what I'm doing.
I think, what you said at scale, but I think it does scale. And I think, to use a Buddhist saying, with the Dharma, which is we do what's in front of us, right? And by you doing what's in front of you and helping in the way that you can in what is in your sphere or scope to influence, that is hugely impactful. And I think it does scale. And I think it's a great answer. So what have I not asked you that I should have, or what are some other insights that maybe you'd like to share? Anything top of mind?
A big topic of discussion is around Of course, AI and its impact to different use cases and companies I'm on the board of, how it impacts talent, how it might impact pricing and be used as a lever or the go-to-market. And so that's a whole nother exciting but separate topic, I would say. But spending a lot of time across the boards that I work with on that is just a really exciting space and a lot of change happening in this world.
There is indeed, and you get to see such a cross section of that in what you do on the boards that on which you sit. And maybe this is a sort of duplicative, but what's really exciting to you right now? Like when you think about the next 3 to 5 years, is there something that's really exciting to you right now?
Yeah. I think it's the breakthroughs that really impact the entire population as a whole. I'll just give you one very specific example of that.
Please.
I don't know if most people are aware, but orange juice might not exist in a decade or so because citrus trees have a greening disease that's affecting their ability to grow. Citrus development or production is cut in half since 2015 because of this bacterial growth on trees that limits their ability to grow fruit. And so, if research isn't done quickly on figuring out the cause and a solution to this, right, there may not be any oranges left in this world. And imagine the amounts of food, ingredients, right, other uses of citrus. And so I think just something like that, where it marries Gen AI with life sciences tech, with agriculture tech, it's just so important and impactful to society as a whole. So I think it's just the excitement that I have around what can be breakthrough are examples that I love to look at.
Absolutely. That's so, I did not know that. And I'm like, I love lemons. Oh my gosh. No. Interesting. And what's, you've accomplished so much and you still have a lot of runway in front of you yet. What's next for you? What's your next mountain to climb? Your next big challenge?
Oh, that's also a tough question. I have 2 young kids, so it's hard for me to look far out. But I think for now, what I'm consumed by is, of course, not just work, but it's a constant learning, right? I think to keep up, to stay on top of things, it is the constant learning. As an example, I just took a Gen AI for product managers course and was vibe coding using Bolt, Lovable, and Replit. Luckily, I have a CS background, so I can, understand that and understand the limitations of AI. But I think for me, it's constant learning, constant staying on top of what's happening.
I love that answer. I think so often we can get to the levels that we get, and I think of you in this. You've achieved so much. It's easy to sit back on that or sort of ride the resume that's gotten you where you are, but to continue to push yourself to learn, to be a lifelong learner, it takes grit and perseverance and a commitment. And I think that's wonderful. And I think for anyone listening who wants or would aspire to be like you or have a career like yours, being a lifelong learner seems like one of the key pillars that's been a part of your success thus far and will continue to be a part of your success. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, good. Well, if people wanted to find you or follow you or knew more about anything that you're involved in, how could they do that?
Yeah, well, find me on LinkedIn. And then just a plug for intro.com. I'm an expert on their network. You can also find me through that. And love hearing from folks and talking with folks about all things startups, entrepreneurship, boards, tech, AI.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for all of the insights and just the perspective that you have it's fantastic. So, and thank you for that offer for folks to reach out to you so that you can continue to be impactful like you shared. So thank you so much, Caroline. So grateful for your time with us today.
Thank you.